Power is not granted, it is taken, and the sharpest minds know that in the pursuit of dominance, whether in politics, business, or personal life, the battlefield is not out there. It begins within. The undisciplined mind is easily manipulated, distracted by noise, swayed by the crowd. But the one who cultivates absolute self-focus, that one becomes untouchable. Self-focus is not a virtue. It is a weapon, cold, precise, and surgical. It does not negotiate. It cuts through chaos like a blade through silk, and only those willing to wield it ruthlessly can rise above the masses who seek comfort instead of control. Most people do not live their own lives. They live the expectations, routines, and delusions that others have created for them. Their words are borrowed, their values are inherited, and their goals are reflections of what the herd applauds. They wake up reacting to messages, to demands, to noise, never questioning who benefits from their distraction. The truth is simple and brutal. You are either focused on yourself, or you are being used by someone who is. There is no neutrality. Either you build your life by design, or you become a tool in someone else's. The masses are easy to lead because they are easy to distract. Their attention is a currency they give away for free. They think they are thinking, but they are only consuming. They believe they are choosing, but they are only responding. They scroll endlessly, speak carelessly, and chase endlessly after approval that has no substance. They think they are alive, but they are only animated by the agendas of louder voices. This is not living. This is being used. And the tragedy is that they don't even see it happening. Self-focus is the first act of rebellion. It is the decision to become dangerous, not in noise, but in control, not in chaos, but in clarity. To focus on the self is to declare that your time, your energy, your mind are not for sale. You stop leaking your strength to gossip, to opinions, to trends. You begin to separate what is essential from what is empty. You begin to ask the one question that terrifies the mediocre: what do I want, and what must I do to get it? This is where most break. The moment the mirror becomes a battlefield, the weak look away. It is easier to blame, to explain, to pretend. But the focused mind does not seek excuses. It seeks leverage. It asks, what is under my control? And then sharpens it until it becomes a weapon. It does not wait for motivation. It moves with discipline. It does not beg for understanding. It acts with precision, and the more it focuses inward, the more untouchable it becomes. In a world that rewards obedience and punishes clarity, self-focus is feared. Why? Because it creates a person who cannot be manipulated. A person who no longer needs to be liked. A person who does not need to explain their absence from trivial things. They become unpredictable and therefore powerful. You cannot control someone who answers to no one but themselves. You cannot use someone who is already using themselves fully. They become an anomaly, a threat to every system built on compliance. People will call it selfish. Let them. It is not your job to dilute yourself for the comfort of the distracted. Most people have never even met their real selves. They are too busy performing. But when you turn inward, brutally and honestly, you stop performing and start transforming. You stop being an echo and start becoming a force. You begin to separate your path from the paths of others. And that is when the world begins to take you seriously. Because nothing is more intimidating than a person who has made their inner world sovereign. You are not here to live someone else's dream. You are not here to answer every call, to smile at every joke, to nod at every lie. You are here to build, to evolve, to win. And none of that can happen until you direct your full gaze inward. That is when your mind stops being a playground and becomes a fortress. That is when your time stops being wasted and starts becoming invested. That is when you move from being an extra in other people's stories to becoming the author of your own attention is the most valuable resource you possess, more valuable than time, more powerful than money, more dangerous than any weapon in the hands of the undisciplined. Where your attention goes, your energy follows, and where your energy flows, your reality is shaped. This is why those who wish to rule you do not need to chain your body, they simply need to scatter your focus. They flood you with noise, flood you with urgency, flood you with empty novelty dressed as information, because they know a distracted mind cannot think, cannot plan, cannot resist. Every alert, every headline, every meaningless task disguised as importance is a quiet theft of your mental power. You don't notice it happening until you are hollowed out from the inside, still breathing, still moving, but no longer your own. To guard your attention is not an act of peace. It is an act of war. You are in a constant battle against demands that do not serve you, opinions that do not concern you, problems that are not yours to solve. Every moment you give your attention freely is a moment stolen from your own mission. You become available to everyone and useful to no one, especially yourself. The world will never stop pulling at you, trying to seduce you with distraction and urgency. It is your job to fortify your mind, to raise the drawbridge, to refuse entry to anything that does not sharpen you. People who live with open gates are overrun first. People who do not filter what enters their mind soon lose control of it entirely. The most dangerous people in the world are not the loudest. They are the most focused. They do not move to the rhythm of the world. They make the world move to theirs. They do not explain their silence. They do not justify their absence. They are building something the crowd will not understand until it is too late to catch up. They are not concerned with visibility. They are concerned with control. The ones who protect their attention become the ones who shape the future. The ones who let it leak away become spectators in their own lives. Watching others do what they themselves were too distracted to even begin. Your phone is not neutral. Your environment is not neutral. Your habits are not neutral. Everything is either sharpening you or softening you, moving you closer to your purpose or dragging you away from it. To guard your attention is to take responsibility for your reality, to reclaim the throne of your mind. It is to understand that you do not owe your attention to anyone simply because they demand it. You do not need to be available. You do not need to respond. You do not need to be seen unless you decide visibility serves your plan. Most people are addicted to being noticed. The focused are addicted to progress. One creates noise. The other creates results. The average mind is scattered across 1,000 things, each one stealing just enough attention to prevent any real power from forming. But the focused mind is terrifying because it concentrates everything, every thought, every resource, every drop of energy, onto one target. And when that kind of mind locks onto something, the world bends. The world has no defense against a person who refuses to be pulled away from what matters. Focus creates inevitability, not because the path is easy, but because the person walking it is undistracted. While others hesitate, compare, react, the focused one executes. Quietly, relentlessly, unstoppably. They don't seek balance. They seek dominance over their own attention, over their own mind, over the temptation to drift into mediocrity. And they win not by trying harder, but by subtracting ruthlessly. They remove what is irrelevant, say no to what is unnecessary, ignore what is designed to provoke. They are not at war with the world. They are simply immune to it. And that immunity is not a gift. It is earned, built, sharpened, guarded, not once but daily, because attention, once lost, rarely returns with the same strength. And those who let it go too easily will never understand why power keeps slipping through their hands without explanation, without noise, without warning. Isolation is misunderstood by the weak because they equate presence with relevance, noise with significance, and business with power. They fear being alone because in the absence of distraction, they are forced to face themselves. And that confrontation terrifies them more than failure or rejection. But those who rise, those who build, those who dominate, they understand something colder, something cleaner. Mastery does not happen in the crowd. Mastery is born in isolation, refined in silence, sharpened by deliberate withdrawal from anything and anyone that does not contribute to the mission. The crowd demands conformity, demands compromise, demands performance. But isolation demands clarity, demands strength, demands the courage to be the only voice in the room, and still not flinch. In isolation, you are no longer performing for the expectations of others. You are no longer validating your worth through their reactions, their applause, their understanding. You become the only judge, the only observer, the only standard. This is not comfort. It is confrontation. You see the weakness in your habits, the softness in your thinking, the laziness in your discipline. And without the noise of others to blame, the mirror becomes brutally honest. And that is the point. You are not isolating yourself to hide. You are isolating yourself to strip away the layers of delusion that have accumulated from the world's influence. You are not withdrawing to disappear. You are withdrawing to reappear in a form they won't recognize, a form they can't imitate, a form they will not be prepared to compete with. Those who never isolate never evolve. They grow horizontally, not vertically. They collect information, but never build insight. They gather contacts, but never form conviction. They attend events, but never find purpose. They are always around others, and yet somehow always lost. Isolation breaks that cycle because it removes the noise, and when the noise is gone, only the essential remains. You begin to identify what actually matters. What moves the needle? What fuels you instead of drains you? The average person will never experience this because they are addicted to input, constantly consuming, constantly distracted, constantly pulled in every direction, except the one that leads inward. The most focused, the most powerful, the most strategic individuals do not fear being alone because they know that in solitude they are not without company. They are in the presence of their thoughts, their vision, their future. They use isolation the way a soldier uses a weapon, not carelessly, not constantly, but with intention and precision. They retreat not to escape pressure, but to apply pressure where it matters most. They train in the dark. They think without interruption. They build routines without external validation. And by the time they return to the world, they have already won battles no one else even saw. The crowd teaches you to move fast, to respond quickly, to match the tempo of the moment. But isolation teaches you to slow down, to think deeply, to move deliberately. You learn to act, not react. You learn to observe without being pulled. You begin to see how much time you've lost being available to people who had no value, being present in spaces that brought no return, being emotionally entangled in things that had no consequence. Isolation strips this all away and reveals the brutal equation of power. Focus multiplied by time equals transformation. And you cannot generate either in the presence of constant noise. To sit with yourself, in silence, in discomfort, in the absence of praise, is to begin building something that does not depend on the outside world. That is where self-trust is born. That is where mental sharpness begins. And that is where you start becoming someone who no longer needs to announce their intentions, someone who no longer needs to explain their ambition, someone who no longer needs permission to grow beyond the level of those who never dared to separate long enough to rise above the noise they mistake for reality. Emotion is the easiest way to control a mind because it bypasses reason and pulls directly at the strings of impulse. And the more emotionally reactive a person is, the more predictable they become, the more easily they can be manipulated, provoked, distracted, and led away from what actually matters. Emotion creates urgency where none exists, conflict where none is necessary, and weakness disguised as sincerity. The world is engineered to trigger emotion at every turn. Headlines designed to enrage, advertisements crafted to excite, conversations that provoke guilt or pride, all to keep you reacting instead of thinking, moving instead of planning, feeling instead of executing. And the one who has not learned to separate emotion from decision will live a life dictated by forces outside themselves. To cultivate mental power, you must first cultivate emotional distance, not because emotion is inherently wrong, but because it is unreliable. One moment it tells you to fight, the next to flee, the next to surrender. It shifts with mood, with environment, with exhaustion, with memory, and those who rely on it as a compass end up lost, pulled in directions that serve no strategy. Precision requires detachment. You must be able to observe without absorbing, to hear without reacting, to feel without obeying the feeling. This is not coldness. This is control. The kind of control that allows you to stand in the center of chaos and remain unmoved, not because you don't care, but because you refuse to give your mind over to forces that weaken it. When you remove emotion from a decision, you see more clearly who is lying, who is useful, who is wasting your time, what needs to be done, what needs to be cut, where your energy belongs, where it is being drained. You stop playing games of validation and start moving like a strategist. You stop defending your ego and start defending your mission. Emotion clouds judgment by anchoring you to the moment, to how things feel right now. But mental power requires that you see beyond the now, that you act for the long term, that you choose what will serve you in 10 years, not just what soothes you in 10 minutes. The ability to delay gratification, to resist provocation, to stay neutral in the face of both praise and insult, is the mark of someone who is no longer ruled by emotion, but rules through clarity. Most people are ruled by how they feel. If they don't feel like working, they don't. If they feel insulted, they lash out. If they feel anxious, they stop. If they feel unmotivated, they quit. This is how average people live, as prisoners of their mood, as slaves to their shifting states. But the powerful understand that action must be detached from emotion. You do the work whether you feel like it or not. You move forward whether you're afraid or not. You speak the truth whether it's convenient or not. Because if your actions are tied to how you feel, you will never be consistent, and without consistency there is no momentum, no mastery, no dominance. The world has taught people that to feel deeply is to be authentic, but this is a lie used to weaken your defenses. Real authenticity is when your actions reflect your values, not your moods. When your discipline overrides your emotion. When your response is chosen, not automatic. There is a quiet power in the one who does not rise to provocation, who does not explain their calm, who does not lose themselves to praise or criticism, who walks into rooms without needing to be understood, because they are not driven by the need to be seen, but by the need to execute. Emotion tells you what to avoid. Precision tells you where to strike. And when you build the mental power to choose one over the other, you move from being reactive to being untouchable, from being predictable to being unreadable, from being led by others to being followed in silence by those who wonder how you became so clear in a world that thrives on confusion and collapses when it meets someone who does not flinch. The ones who rise highest are not competing with others, because they have already understood the illusion. The crowd is not the standard. The market is not the benchmark, and comparison is the language of the weak who have not yet discovered themselves. To compete with others is to trap yourself in a cycle of imitation, measuring your progress with someone else's ruler, chasing shadows instead of building substance, reacting to their pace instead of mastering your own. But the one who focuses inward, who wakes each day with a single question, "How do I outdo who I was yesterday?" becomes dangerous not because they want to be better than others, but because they refuse to remain the same as they were before improvement. When done with true self-focus, is silent, relentless, and surgical. It does not beg for praise. It does not seek recognition. It does not slow down for applause. Every day becomes a battle between you and the previous version of yourself. Not a glamorous war, but a brutal dismantling of your own excuses, your own patterns, your own comforts. And this war is private, invisible to the world, unappreciated by the masses who only notice results, never the process. The world will call it obsession, they will call it intensity, they will call it unnecessary, because they cannot comprehend what it looks like to fight against your own limits, while they are still trying to outperform someone else's expectations. To compete with yourself is to reject the noise, to reject the need for validation, to reject the false motivation that comes from seeing others succeed or fail. Their wins are not yours to envy. Their losses are not yours to enjoy. You are not moved by their progress because your eyes are fixed on a different target. The man or woman in the mirror who is either rising or decaying, either evolving or stagnating, either executing or drifting. The external world becomes background static while your internal scoreboard sharpens with every small victory, every inch of growth, every habit kept, every weakness confronted. Most people plateau, not because they lack talent, but because they start measuring themselves against people who stopped growing long ago. They aim to be better than the average, and when they reach that low standard, they stop moving, they stop sharpening, they start decaying in comfort while calling it success. But the one who competes only with their past never stops climbing, because the work is never finished. There is always a sharper edge, a cleaner execution, a faster pace, a deeper understanding. There is always a new version of yourself that you have not yet met. A version that exists only if you earn it, only if you fight for it, only if you keep pushing without applause and without distraction. This type of self-driven evolution is quiet and unspectacular from the outside. There are no medals for doing one more rep than you wanted to, for reading when you didn't feel like it, for saying no to distractions that everyone else calls fun. But these are the bricks that build unstoppable momentum, the kind of momentum that cannot be faked, cannot be borrowed, cannot be replicated by